Hello and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Friday, 27 March. I'm your host Daniel, and today we're going to talk about European NATO defence spending has rose by almost 20% in 2025. Trump has extended his deadline for striking Iranian energy infrastructure, and Hungary has charged a journalist after its minister was caught speaking to Moscow. So firstly, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte presented his annual report on the alliance's activities at the headquarters in Brussels on Thursday, lauding a 1/5 real-term increase in defence spending in Europe and Canada in 2025. Between 2014 and 2025, NATO and European allies have more than doubled their annual defence expenditure, with real-term increases of 106% in 2025 alone. NATO allies in Europe and Canada invested a roughly 574 billion or 500 billion euros in defence, a 20% increase in real terms compared to 2024, he said in the foreword of the report. He said that all allies reported meeting their annual targets of 2% GDP on defence, with 3 saying they had met the new 3.5% objective set for 2035. So what? I think Trump putting this much pressure on NATO to become self-sufficient is one of the best things he's done since coming into office, while it has had its downside of, essentially alienating the US from its European allies. Having them actually put money into defense and boosting their defense spending was a significant victory for European security. However, it's unlikely that they are still self-sufficient in terms of security just yet, and it will take a considerable amount of time to put the money and time aside to build the right technology, the right factories, and the right equipment to be self-sufficient. Likely focusing on drones going forward, because they have shown in Ukraine that they're extremely effective on the battlefield, and it's almost certain we're going to see massive spending in that going forward. And next, US President Donald Trump said that he would again extend his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face destruction of its energy plants after Tehran have rejected his 15-point plan. The 4-week war has spread across the Middle East, killing thousands of people and hitting the global economy with soaring energy prices and fueling global inflation fears. The United States and Israel launched strikes on February 28th during talks with Tehran about its nuclear program that had not yet yielded a deal. On Thursday, Trump threatened during a cabinet meeting at the White House to increase pressure on Iran if it did not make a deal. He later posted on social media that he would pause the threatened strikes on the Iranian energy plants for 10 days until April 6th at 8 p.m. So what? I think it's highly likely that Trump is hoping that Iran will bow to his pressure and end the conflict, basically making a deal on his terms, reopening the straits and re-securing energy for the global economy. However, I think this feels unlikely. Iran has shown they are willing to continue this fight and that their plan is working in terms of shutting the Straits of Hormuz and causing a global economic crisis that basically they can blame on the US and, make everyone angry at the US. It's possible that the US may be forcing itself, essentially, into ground operations, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz and possibly around Iranian oil infrastructure in the Gulf. I do think this would be a terrible decision and would go extremely poorly, but I'm also not under the pressures that the US government are. And lastly, the Hungarian government has filed charges against one of the country's most prominent investigative journalists, accusing him of spying for Ukraine as officials grapple with the fallout of allegations that Budapest shared confidential EU information with Moscow. The claims of espionage cap off a tumultuous week in Hungarian politics, in which relations with the EU plummeted to new lows, and polls suggest that Viktor Orban's Fidesz party is still lagging behind, just leading into next month's election. At the heart of this latest row is allegations that Hungary's foreign minister, whose last name I can't pronounce, had routinely dialed up his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, to pass off details of confidential EU meetings during breaks. The foreign minister first dismissed allegations, but later acknowledged that he had conferred with Lavrov before and after EU foreign minister meetings about their agenda discussions, describing such conversations as diplomacy. So what? I mean, it's pretty deeply disturbing what we're finding out about Hungarian politics, and it likely shows where the Orban government is politically. I mean, it also shows how dangerous they've become within Europe. Passing off confidential EU information to one of the bloc's greatest adversaries during the meetings is an extremely dangerous thing to be doing, and something that just can't happen if you want to succeed against them. It's likely if the election is clean that Orban is going to lose it. Current polling numbers have him trailing significantly behind the opposition party. But if he does win by some degree of influence or manipulation, it could possibly lead to big changes in Europe. I don't think Europe will stand for this, and I don't think he will allow someone who is essentially acting as a spy for Russia to attend meetings in which confidential information is shared. And it could lead to Hungary being isolated out of these meetings, or possibly taking steps towards removing them from the EU, which would be massive. But I think they're basically just hoping that the election makes this a non-issue and they don't have to deal with this going forward. But yeah, that's been your Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you again tomorrow. See you.